Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this current session. Recycling is not broken, but it can use some help. My name is Maurice Sampson. I am currently the Eastern Pennsylvania Director for Clean Water Action and former recycling coordinator in the city of Philadelphia. Tonight, we are going to hear from three panelists, all long time and very distinguished in this field, to give us their perspectives on strategies for reducing contamination, using community-based approaches for recycling, processing, and so forth. What I would like you to do as we go through the program tonight, if you have any questions, please just post those in the chat, and we will, I would imagine, after we have heard from the speakers, we'll then have the questions and a great discussion. Our first speaker tonight will be Neil Seldman. Neil is the zero waste advocate with extensive experience in the field. He is a co-founder of the Institute for Local Self-Reliance and has served as their director of its Waste to Wealth initiative for some 48 years. He's also a co-founder of the National Recycling Coalition, the Grassroots Recycling Network, Zero Waste USA, and too many other organizations to list. Neil, let me turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Maurice. And it's a pleasure to, one, participate in the Zero Waste USA conference, and particularly with this panel of people I've been working with for quite some time. I appreciate that. The background for my comments, which will last about 8 or 9 minutes, is an article that will be coming out in the December newsletter of the National Recycling Coalition. It was co-authored with Susan Kinsella. If you don't know Susan, she was the CEO of Conservatory, a very important organization, business at the beginning of our recycling movement back in the 70s. And she is currently now the chairperson, the CEO of the Recycling Archives Project, which I urge all of you interested in the history of US recycling to take a look at. It's quite a gathering of people, ideas, and experiences. I'm very optimistic about the future of recycling in the United States. And if Dennis, if you could put up that one chart I sent you, I'd appreciate it. What the chart shows is that beginning in the late 1960s, 69 perhaps, as the beginning of the post-World War II recycling efforts in the United States, I consider that period, 1969, 1970, the first revolution in US recycling for our generation. And as you can see from the chart, the progression from roughly 1970 to 2005 is a 45-degree angle, which means we went from virtually, well, let's say 2 or 3% to 35% in about 30 years. The next part of the chart you will see is completely flat. Obviously, we made this a little simpler for people to understand. It wasn't completely flat. It dipped and it went up, went down to 32. Now it's back at 35. And that's what we want to talk about, because those 20 years basically diverted the recycling revolution. I believe it was because of monopoly control over the system and imposing a system that made it harder and harder for people to understand recycling, keep things separate, keep things clean, and it also promoted disposal, incineration, landfill and incineration. You can see from the rest of the chart, I'm quite optimistic that we're going to get to zero waste, not in my lifetime, but maybe within my son's lifetime. And I think that can happen. Now, even though we've been stagnating at 32, 35% for the past 20 odd years, I'm rounding off, of course, recycling has had some remarkable successes. You could go to LA, San Francisco, Portland, Seattle, Oceanside, California. These are large cities. They're at close to 70%. LA and San Francisco are a bit over 70%, and the other cities are approaching 70%. In smaller towns, you have many communities at that level. And in the Bethlehem, New York, a 30,000 population city, a suburb of Albany, they also, in the small city category, they are at 60%, a little bit higher than that. So basically, any city that wants to get to these very high levels of recycling, all those cities I mentioned are double or close to double or more than double the national average. There is nothing stopping any city from doing exactly what those cities, towns, and counties have done. All recycling in different parts of the country may be different, but the pattern is there. Keep it separate, keep it clean, the markets are there, and the costs will come down. So what are the characteristics that the rest of the country has to implement in order to reach these very high levels, approaching the 70%? Of course, 90% is what we're shooting for, which is our grassroots definition of zero waste. 90% diversion of the current waste stream, no incineration, organics out of landfill, etc. And I would urge you to go to the Zero Waste International Alliance webpage to get the more specific definition and other vital details. So what are we talking about? Well, we're talking about what's happening in the cities that I already mentioned and many others. Recycling and composting is mandatory. Communities can raise their own capital through surcharges. Boulder, Colorado, Champaign-Urbana capitalized their early recycling system by surcharges. That is, if it cost you $5, let me be more realistic, $50 to put a ton of garbage in the ground, those cities imposed a $2, $3, $4 fee, and that fee was collected for capitalization of recycling. Alameda County in California, where Oakland resides, still has theirs. Their surcharges, I believe, $10 or $12, we can check, but they're raising about $10 million a year from this surcharge on their landfills, which they in turn invest in private companies. They make grants, etc., loans, and of course community and government programs. And Oakland in the past 10 years has created over 1,000 jobs. Another city that has invested heavily in zero waste is Austin, Texas. They've created over 600 jobs and remarkably over $1 billion of economic activity because they invested in recycling, reuse, and composting. I'll point out that that decision was made as they were building an incinerator. The only time in the history of the US that an incinerator was in process and it was rejected at a cost of $22 million in order for the county, the city of Austin to make far much more money or save much more money through their current investments. Here are some of the rules. I think we know them. I mentioned the surcharge, the pay as you throw, which is unit pricing for garbage, which allows people to reduce their expenditures for garbage by recycling and composting. There's a shared savings tactic. And this is very important for groups that are getting and companies that are getting involved in composting. I'll give the example of Urban Ore in Berkeley. They have a contract with the city to pull out recyclables, reusables from the transfer station, just before it gets shipped off to the landfill. Landfill costs them $41, $42 a ton. So Urban Ore and they're negotiated a service fee. Every ton that they pull out of the transfer station and save the city $41, they get $41. They actually save the city more than that because the city doesn't have to transfer that material. There's a private company, a collection recycling company called Roadrunner that emphasizes shared savings for their small business clients that prepare the materials correctly for easy collection, easy processing, easy marketing. So shared savings is absolutely critical. There is a very short box score, if you will, of what has to be done. You have to tax what you don't want, plastic, certainly non-recyclable or hybrid plastic. You have to invest in what you want, composting, reuse, recycling, etc.
You only have 8 minutes.
Thank you. You have to ban what's dangerous. and you have to vote for people who support zero waste. It's not very simple. It is simple. It's not very complicated. And I'll end by saying, thank you again for that reminder, Maurice. I'll end by saying that I focus on where the waste stream can be handled at the local level. And here we're talking about composting, which has virtually no economy of scale, and it produces something that's precious, topsoil that creates life, and reuse. All of those can be conducted within the confines of your neighborhood or your area. They bring in money, they save the city. Composting, as you know, is absolutely essential to conquer climate warming, climate change and climate warming. And reuse is absolutely essential for the local economy. Reuse businesses are soaring. I happen to know that Urban Ore in Berkeley pays about $350,000 a year in local taxes. And over here in Washington, D.C., where I live, our wonderful reuse company, Community Forklift, is paying they're paying about $120,000 to $150,000 per year. So reuse is essential for the local economy. It allows people to get high quality goods for pennies on the dollar. And I could talk for a couple more hours on reuse, but I am going to stop right there. And I want to thank you for your time.
Thank you, Neil. And I want to remind everybody again, if you have any questions as the talks are going, please post them right away. When the time comes, I will be drawing from those questions to ask. So you won't be doing it personally. So remember to do it now. Our next speaker is Joanne Schaefer. Joanne is the Deputy Executive Director and Recycling Coordinator in Central County, Pennsylvania. And for Recycling Reuse, for the Center County and Recycling Reuse Authority in Pennsylvania. She's going to offer a case study for curbside sort and drop collection in a rural county. Joanne.
Thank you, Maurice. I'm double checking sound here. Sounds like everything is good to go, and it's really good to see old friends. And I want to talk a little bit about something that's been going on the last 2 days with zero waste. And if you could go to the next, please, Dennis. And I want to draw some conclusions about, sort of that everything old is new again. I've been hearing that a fair amount over the last 2 days. Maybe we want to get back and look at the kinds of things that grandma did and so on and so forth. So let me start a little bit with kind of a snapshot of who we are, what we do. We are in Central County, Pennsylvania, which is right smack dab in the middle of Pennsylvania. And we are the home of the Pennsylvania State University, the main campus. And that is pertinent for a number of reasons. One is you can see that our population, particularly compared to some of the cities that Neil just mentioned, is pretty small. 1,111 square miles, 158,000 people. That includes the 50,000 students that also live in our county. Another challenge that we often face, and something to think about definitely, is the distribution and the rural nature of our county. So we were originally a land grant, not we, the university was originally a land grant. When Lincoln was making the land grants, they didn't give the best city land. So we are still extremely rural. Out of that 158,000 population, about 90,000, if maybe even a little bit more, live near the campus in the municipalities that are immediately surrounding it. Something else I want to point out is that the students are counted here because they're here 9 months of the year, so they are counted in the census. Out of those 1,111 square miles, 284,000 acres, or 40% of the land of our county, is public land. So that's state forest and state parks, as well as municipal parks, but mostly state and state game lands. It happens to be hunting season in central Pennsylvania right now. So again, very, very rural once you get outside of that core group. And the final thing I want to mention in this particular slide is that only 29% of that student population lives on campus. So we in the town are responsible for the rest of the students that are there. Go to the next, please, Dennis. Thank you. A little bit about our authority. We are a specially formed body in Pennsylvania. We're a quasi-governmental agency, which is a municipal authority. We are governed by 7 board members that are appointed by our county commissioners. And I know that Neil mentioned this. I've heard a couple other folks say this as well. We have 72 employees. So our payroll is a little over $3 million a year. So we are a major employer within our county. The first, of course, being the university itself, the second being our local hospital. We own and operate a transfer station for trash. We do not have a landfill nearby, nor do we have a waste to energy facility nearby. So all of the trash from the county is being transferred to a landfill that is about 80 miles away. We have an interpretive center. I'll talk about that in a second. Our recycling processing facility, we have a public-private partnership for a CNG station, which is on property that we own, but it is operated, and the station itself is owned by a private sector entity. That gives you a little bit of what we're looking at. We have 125 drop-off locations spread among those 1,111 square miles. We do collect that by our authority, as well as over 800 commercial businesses. One of the things I do want to point out is because we're a college town, now with the pandemic hopefully on the wane, we have a fair amount of bars, fair amount of restaurants. So they are still vending beer, definitely in glass. 27,000 plus curbside households. Those are single family households. And we process 15,000 tons a year in our processing facility. We did a green building project, again, more on that later. But part of our long range strategic plan has been for some time now a zero waste goal in 30 years. And you can go to the next, please. So how are we going to accomplish that? Well, this may be interesting to some of you who are definitely used to single stream or even dual stream. We are still a curb sort. So we literally have, now we've got 14 crews going out over the course of a week, and our residents, essentially, it is single stream to them because they're putting everything into an open top bin or 2. We will give them a free bin if they have more recyclables than what 1 bin can hold. The size of them is pretty key because they can get pretty heavy. So our folks are actually going out curbside and they are sorting into 11 different curbside items each and every week. So you see a dump trailer. We do have also in one of our municipalities, which is Bellefonte, the county seat. It's an old town, so an alley system. Some of you in bigger cities have seen that. So they are able, if they need to disattach that trailer to make it around some other, some of the more narrow places that we have to go. But the truck itself is compartmentalized into 3 separate compartments, and then the trailer that we're pulling behind is 5. So, by the way, I just want to mention that these guys, they're running their tails off, definitely for sure. And they average in our more densely populated areas about 45 seconds a stop. So it is a little old fashioned, but it definitely works for us. One of the things I want to point out here as well is remember that we also process and market all of these materials. And so everyone's mentioned it the last several days. Quality is the key absolutely the key to making sure when you are particularly in a relatively small area. We have no big city that is anywhere near us. Pennsylvania has sometimes been described as Philadelphia, where Maurice is, and Pittsburgh, with a lot of Alabama in between. We're the Alabama in between. So there is literally almost nothing anywhere near to us. So what is the key to getting the participation and having people make sure that they're putting the correct things? And you go to the next, Dennis. Um, I've heard it said over and over again the last 2 days. I've said it myself over and over again. Education, 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 education. And if you think you've educated enough, go out and do it at least 10 times more, and then maybe you're getting close. So our first line of education actually is our curbside crews. So because they're hand picking through, right, they have the opportunity to see what might not belong. So they're leaving a tag. This is not acceptable, and here's why. There's our number. You can go to our website, call us afterwards. First line of communication. I heard Maggie Clark say a little bit earlier, it takes everything. So we've got website, social media, tours of our plant. Thank you, Maurice, and so on. But this is really the first line. Go to the next, Dennis. I do want to mention also our commercial collection is absolutely source separated by the individual. This is how we service multifamily apartment buildings in our downtown areas, as well as bars, restaurants, office, and so forth. So they are required, all under ordinance, to source separate it. We do have 2 enforcement people on staff that will go out if our crews are finding that there is an issue at a particular one. In general, what we will do is we will tag someone 3 times, and then we will send someone out on a personal visit. Go to the next, please, Dennis. Again, drop off. So I mentioned several times how rural we are. The best way for us to staff those drop offs is with these compartmentalized roll offs. They are unstaffed, and we do occasionally run into some issues here with contamination. Our biggest challenge is here we don't have a direct touch with the resident. So, someone a number of years ago thought they were doing us a huge favor. They actually took apart a refrigerator and put the plastic in the plastic bin and the metal in the metal bin. Thank you, folks. We don't want a refrigerator. So then we have also used sorry, it just slipped my mind because I looked at the chat real quickly. Cameras. If we have a place where we're really running into issues, we will put up a camera. Just want to touch real quickly on why we didn't go single stream. We looked at it. It was cost prohibitive for us. The participation rate in our curbside areas is already hitting 90 to 92%. So we weren't going to gain anything there. And the capital investment was going to be prohibited. So, but there are always challenges. Go to the next one, please, Dennis. What you are looking at, I'm sorry, next one. The full report on the single stream can be found at that link, which I believe you're all going to get a little bit later. What you are looking at there is blue bag from the tailgates during Penn State home football games. Our county population doubles by fans coming to watch the Nittany Lions play. So that is a system that is not best. It runs about 50% contamination. One of our biggest contaminants is red Solo cups, which we do not take for recycling. One final thing, next one, please, Dennis. And in addition to challenges, we have surprises. So this was pulled on us by athletics. 2 games in this season that my goodness, they were going to start for the first time in 175 years selling beer in cans in Beaver Stadium. We learned about it in the local newspaper, as well as Physical Plant found it in the local newspaper. So we had to scramble and come up with a system to try to recycle those things on literally 2 days' notice. So we'll address that in questions if we've got time. So last one here, if you would advance, please, Dennis, the quintessential last wrap-up slide. I just want to mention here that remember, what you're going to market is only as good as what goes out your door. So we've got to control the system, or we have tried to control the system from the very beginning all the way going out the door, because again, our rural nature, our access to markets is somewhat limited. But I will tell you that in my 32 years, we have never had a load rejected. And the next to last slide, which is my contact information. Thank you. I'll wrap it up there and look forward to hearing Gary.
Thank you, Joanne. Okay, Gary, you are on, and give me just a second here. There we are. Gary is the Vice President of Zero Waste USA for Education Programs. He is the past President, Honorary Lifetime Board Member for the National Recycling Coalition. He's Coordinator of Recycling as Infrastructure Too Much campaign, a consultant for zero waste for communities, businesses, and institutions. And I will say, I worked in the office in Newark right after you left. Long time. Welcome, Gary. Take it away.
Thanks so much, Maurice, and an honor to be on this panel with the other folks here. We started the Recycling as Infrastructure 2 campaign in the spring last year when the new administration was coming in, and we wanted to add our voices to others that were calling for investment in infrastructure in the country, and to remember that reuse, recycling, waste prevention, composting, market development should all be considered as part of the infrastructure legislation that was being considered. And the good news is there's lots of things that were adopted by Congress, and help is on the way. The campaign was organized by principally Institute for Local Self-Reliance with Neil, Zero Waste USA, and the National Recycling Coalition, and then greeneducation.us also contributed significantly to help in the organizing of the early days of the campaign. One of the significant things that was developed by July of 2021 was the American Recycling Infrastructure Plan, calling for 50 different types of initiatives over 3 years, investing $18 billion in waste prevention, reuse, recycling, composting, market development. And that plan was built on prior plans that were put forward by the Recycling Partnership, the U.S. Food Loss and Waste Policy Action Plan, Break Free from Plastic, the Priority Plastic Actions for the first year of the administration, and the Compost Act that came out in July by the Compost Infrastructure Coalition. We did a lot of webinars over the last 2 years, beginning in March of 2021. This is just a small sampling of some of the titles that we addressed. Most importantly, federal funding in March and June was highlighted to alert people to the funding that was adopted in the legislation that made it through Congress. And we've been highlighting this information in a number of forums, including the Resource Recycling Congress, the conference, the National Recycling Congress, and now at this event as well. The first up for highlighting in available funding is there's $100 million that was just recently announced from EPA under the bipartisan infrastructure law. 30 million of that is for basically local government for a wide range of activities, including reuse, recycling, repair, refurbishment, and composting. Interestingly, we've heard a report recently that They will not be funding out of this money waste energy systems. So I know a lot of the people in this room probably sent in letters urging them not to, and we heard back through Gaia that it looks like that will not happen. So all this money's for the stuff we want to do. Applications are coming up really quickly, January 16th. But this is a 5-year program. There's funding available at the level of $55 million per year for solid waste infrastructure grants. And this is the first solicitation. Notice of funding opportunity has been released with the deadline of January 16th. This second part of the $100 million is 40 to go to states and territories and DC for similar activities. They're asking for notices of intent to participate by December 15th. So hopefully you've contacted your state agencies to make sure they're pursuing this and indicating that they want to participate. Did include here the link actually, we'll put that into the chat of how to stay connected for the EPA funding. There's a lot of great information at their websites. The third part of the $100 million program is for recycling education and outreach grants. And this is for $30 million for states, tribes, territories, local governments, and other organizations, including nonprofits, is my understanding. And it's all about education and outreach on waste prevention, reuse, recycling, and composting. So those applications are also due January 16th. And this is one that's going to be highly competitive in my mind. It'll be really important to be competitive in that, to follow up on the Justice 40 initiative that's overarching all of these grants, which I'll talk about in a minute. Next, that happened. Sorry. The next grants are for brownfields, grants and technical assistance. This is for states, tribes, communities, and other stakeholders to work together to assess, safely clean up, and sustainably reuse brownfields. In some of our webinars, we've highlighted recently the reuse corridor in West Virginia that Neil Seldman's been working with a lot, that has used the brownfields monies there for that really exciting project that just got another $8 million grant for expanding their efforts. This is for all sorts of groups, including nonprofit organizations, redevelopment agencies. The nonprofits are 501c3s, not the C4s. It's for assessment, cleanup, assessment and cleanup, revolving loan funds, and job training grants. One of the things that was stressed throughout the conference the past 2 days is the opportunity to create lots of jobs, the need for job training. This brownfield grant for job training is a huge opportunity for anyone who wants to get funding to get those job training programs off the ground. The cycle was this fall, so the next time will probably be reoffered in the fall next year. The assessment grants, I understand, particularly for technical assessments, technical assistance, are a one-page application. So unlike many of the federal grants, it's a really simple form. It's one of the best opportunities for getting support to get a new thing off the ground. In the bipartisan infrastructure law, there's $1.5 billion dedicated to this, and they have solicitations being developed for all the 5 categories I just highlighted. And interestingly, the technical assistance is providing $5 million to each of the 10 EPA regions over the next 5-year period. So again, that technical assistance is a huge door to get new projects off the ground and to work on it. And they'll even help you in applying for subsequent grants. So get in the technical assistance, ask for technical assistance to figure this out, get going on that with that one-page application, and then go on to get the rest of the grants. Pollution prevention funding has been funded for decades by the federal government. That's been supplemented by the bipartisan infrastructure law. And this year they had $9 million for some aspects and 13 million for other aspects. It'll be reoffered in 2023. The $27 billion is also available overall for greenhouse gas reduction funding. Comments are being asked for by December 5th on this. The request for information is a tool that EPA uses to help guide them in developing how to structure the grant programs. I encourage you to give your comments in on that $27 billion, encourage them to make part of that available for waste prevention, reuse, recycling, and composting. Speaking of composting, U.S. Department of Agriculture has this great program that they ran over the summer for this year's funding. There's actually 3 different programs. Brenda Platt highlighted recently, there's a third one in addition to these 2. One is for cooperative agreements here, the one's for grants, slightly different availability of amounts for those, and for all the different activities shown on this slide. Justice 40 means that 40% of the all the funding needs to be dedicated to disadvantaged communities, and disadvantaged is a new term of art that includes urban, rural, tribal, and underserved communities. So these are really a key to getting your funding. If you come in with a community-based organization in a disadvantaged community, and the whole community doesn't have to be disadvantaged, it could be an underserved portion of a community, working with a community-based organization, you'll be getting the bonus points of being part of that opportunity. For 40% of the funding has to go to these types of activities. So think how to partner up when you're putting together your programs to accomplish that. The Inflation Reduction Act is newer. I haven't gotten as much information on that. I did summarize the article from Waste Dive in August. It's all about tax credits, incentives, and taxing on oil companies to fund the Superfund program. And the corporate minimum tax could apply to the largest U.S. waste companies, over $1 billion in annual profits. And the Closed Loop Partners estimates they'll create 500,000 new jobs from that act. One key thing in the American Recycling Infrastructure Plan we called for was that proposers use reuse systems, recycled content products, and compost products for any of the infrastructure projects. So if you're involved and know about anything happening in your community with regard to infrastructure projects, advocate that these things happen there. In last year's National Recycling Congress, U.S. Composting Council Executive Director Frank Franciosa showed the pictures on the right of different types of compost products that are prime targets to get funded as part of other infrastructure projects. Grants.gov is the key portal to apply for this. It takes 1 month to 2 months to get on grants.gov, so start now if you haven't already, to get your team together, figure out how to partner and get your assignments, your listed, subscribe to grants.gov. This presentation was developed primarily by Bob Geddard, with me adjusting it based on Dennis's great input, helping to organize the session. So I always end my presentation with a question for the audience. So if at least the speakers could all unmute, I'll be asking that. I just want to highlight that there's a bunch of other details of what this is all about from recent conferences that I didn't have time for presenting, but they will be in the deck that is posted to the conference. So my question to everyone who's unmuted is, how much waste are you for?
Zero.
Zero.
I can't shout. I can't shout louder. There are kids sleeping.
Oh, okay.
If you're not
Okay.
zero waste, how much waste are you for?
Yeah.
I just allowed everyone to be unmuted, so you can do that again, Gary, and get everyone
Okay.
the participant.
Yeah, I want to hear that from all the participants now then. Great. How much waste are you for?
Yes, indeed.
Zero.
All right.
Okay. Everyone's getting the hang of it. Let me try it one more time. Are you ready? On count of 3. 1, 2, 3. How much waste are you for?
Zero.
Okay. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, we are down to about 3 minutes for this program if we are to end on time. So let me just pick one question and hope for some quick answers. Joanne, how do you handle the weather with those open top bins?
Very, very carefully. We let people know that, they should put them out right about when their collection is going to happen. And if we can get down a road, we'll pick it up.
How about your education strategies? How are those working, particularly in your schools?
Everything. From schools, we get every 5th grade in the county. We have 5 school systems come in for a tour. When they touch it, feel it, smell it, they get it right away. Rotary clubs, Kiwanis, community groups. We've got a full-time education coordinator on staff. So every way that we can get. The only thing we haven't tried yet, and I keep threatening to, is a billboard on the side of an Amish buggy.
There we go.
Maurice, can I just say one thing about Joanne's program?
Go for it.
The lesson that I learned, and I learned a long time ago, I've known Joanne for quite some time, capital versus labor. Her system is investing in people, not capital. And I think that's a lesson for us all. If the citizens keep it separate, we can invest in workers and everyone can do well.
Okay, let me hit this question because we only have about a minute left. But what is advice do we give to people that say recycling is broken and that our saying it isn't broken is just greenwashing?
I would say the economics. I will challenge anyone to beat the economics of Joanne's program, and source separation, keeping it simple, saves you money and earns you more money.
I would say that if you consider the automobile industry broken, we're broken because we're as big as the automobile industry in America, documented since 2001. This is not broken. We're working on the next generation of improvements to go upstream, to redesign, refuse, and reuse and compost as well. But
Repair.
and repair is part of reuse, definitely.
Okay.
And we
Joanne,
have to stop
30 seconds.
incineration. The industries want to keep on making plastic and burning plastic, and they're killing us. It's suicide. So recycling is the antidote to suicide.
Cool.
Joanne?
I agree with all of it. We've got to keep going. Don't let the naysayers get us down because we know that it works. We've just got to go to them and talk on their level.
And and I think we're just out of time now, but I just want to say that the system is operating on its own inertia. It wants to keep on doing what it is doing. So it is always about a work to make what we want happen. The work is hard, but it is rewarding. I invite everybody to just go out and make it happen. I think we're out of time, unless I can get a signal otherwise. Thank everybody for your comments. Everyone, enjoy the program, and I'm sure we'll see you in this space again soon. Bye now.
Take care.
Thank you, guys.
See you guys. Good to see you, Maggie.
Hey, Maggie, good to see you. I'm in New York City, Maggie. I'm
Are you?
I'm visiting my friends who live on where am I? I'm on 53rd Street. I don't even know where I am. But it's great to see you, Maggie. And I was help me here, Gary. Perhaps you know. I spoke to Ruth earlier. She said we should stay on for a wrap-up session. So do I just stay where I am now, or do I have to go someplace else?
Is the wrap-up session for this session,
No,
or
I
is it
think-
for the whole conference?
I think she meant a wrap-up for the conference. I'm not sure. But she said.
Yeah, I think it's in the 345 main room that she's talking about. The wrap-up is the next steps session. Go to the main room right now. I think there's a special thing going on there.
Yeah,
Okay,
there's a,
thank you. Thank
there's a
you.
link in the chat for you to go back to the main room.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
A
you.
link
in the chat.
Okay, let me
A
do
tiny URL, just a little one.
Yeah,
Not too big.
I'll add it again. So go ahead, the first thing on the chat.
All right. We'll see everybody there.
Thank you, guys.
Bye
Thanks.
now.
Thank you, everyone.